Do you struggle with saying no? Do you struggle with voicing your honest opinions without fearing disapproval or criticism or judgment? Do you struggle with people pleasing, also known as the fear of man? Well, in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to overcome people pleasing. I encourage you to stick around until the end. There may be some valuable information in today's video for you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Stefania and I upload videos centered around faith, personal growth and development, as well as lifestyle. On this channel, we are consistently growing and evolving, and I love to share some of what I'm learning and what I have learned to become the person I am and continue to grow. And so if this is your sort of content, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the family. I would encourage you to. I would love to have you be a part of this community. So today's video is the first part of a 3-part series I am doing on becoming fearless. And 3 of the most important areas I believe that affects us the most is in our personal life, love and relationships, as well as our business. Most of us battle with fear in those 3 main areas. So the 3-part series will be covering how to become fearless in all of those areas. Today being the first is how to overcome people pleasing, which I also categorize as the fear of man. Now, that's just my theory, and what I always like to say is none of us will ever arrive. We're all learning and growing. And so some of the things that I may say in my videos, later on I may evolve and I may learn more on the topic. But as of right now, this present moment, this is what I've learned so far as it relates to people pleasing. Not only because I've experienced this in my life, but I've noticed patterns as it relates to people pleasing is that when you're able to draw back the layer, what's underneath people pleasing is what I call the fear of man. The Bible also tells us in Proverbs 29 verse 25, the fear of man is like a snare, almost like a trap. I correlate people pleasing and the fear of man as one. That is what I've known to be true and experienced in my life. So we're gonna go deeper in understanding what all of this means. So what I believe is appropriate in understanding the fear of man and people pleasing is getting the clear definition of what fear is, which is the driving force behind people pleasing. So we have the formal definition of what fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or threat. So fear is a natural emotion that we all have that actually protects us from danger in cases that the fear is rational, and like maybe someone's chasing you with their car or someone broke into your house. In cases where the fear is rational, that emotion exists to protect us, to keep us from danger, and for us to respond in a way that is appropriate with the situation. Now, what we're covering in this series are irrational fears. Fears like the fear of man, which is also people pleasing, the fear of love, the fear of failure. All of these irrational fears that were created by patterns in our brains that happen in childhood to protect us from perceived danger. But these situations like the irrational fears that I mentioned are not dangerous at all. And that's what I've come to the realization of when understanding these irrational fears. As the acronym says, is that fear is the false evidence appearing real. So a lot of these fears that we have in our minds are actually false and they're not true at all. And we come to that realization once we're able to conquer that fear. We're gonna get into some tips I believe will help you to overcome people pleasing and the fear of man, some of what has helped me, because I only share what I know to be true and what I've actually walked through. So Now that we have the world's definition of what fear is, we define it as an unpleasant emotion, let's get into a biblical definition. 2 Timothy 1:7 helps us understand that fear is actually a spirit. So 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but love, power, and a sound mind." So this scripture implies and tells us that fear is a spirit. Now, what is a spirit, Stefania? A spirit is a bodiless being that influences our behaviors and our actions and can cause us to do certain things and act in certain ways that we otherwise wouldn't have if that spirit wasn't influencing us. So now that we understand that fear is not only an emotion, but it's also a spirit, we can continue diving deeper into understanding how this all relates as it relates to people pleasing and the fear of man. So let's talk about cases where fear would be rational. I'm going to break these down into two subcategories because I think this helps us understand where a lot of the irrational fears would come from. We have rational versus irrational fears. So a rational fear would be the example that I gave earlier. Someone's chasing you down with their car. Someone just broke into your house. Something just happened that caused a reaction of fear within you. Those would be rational fears. Some irrational fears, and that can actually hinder us from experiencing life to its fullest, would be fear of being in love, fear of being vulnerable, fear of closeness, fear of intimacy, fear of man. These fears would be irrational because there isn't any evidence outside of the one our brain has created to try to keep us safe. There isn't any logical evidence that these things actually would cause us danger. So there's no need to protect us from it if our brain is not perceiving it as danger. And what I've had to do, what's really helpful in undoing a lot of this fear of man and people pleasing, is exploring why that fear is there, questioning why it's there, and find out what story you're telling yourself about that specific thing. So since we're on the topic of the fear of man, this particular fear, which drives people pleasing and people pleasing behaviors, is adopted in childhood. So maybe you were someone with a highly critical parent who only approved of you when you did something good, or awarded you when you did something good, or made you act or perform for their love and their approval. Or maybe you were bullied as a kid and only received relief when you were being this person that you were truly not. So because of that's the original programming, you grow up as an adult, and later on in life, this is the same way you believe that you would gain approval, or to avoid criticism, to avoid conflict, you decided to be a people pleaser. I know firsthand how dangerous being a people pleaser can really be and how much it can negatively impact our lives. I am the oldest of 4 siblings, and I grew up as a third, almost like a third parent in some ways. You know, the older sibling is always the one who's going to look out for everyone, make sure everyone is good, and put everyone else's needs above their own. So naturally, as an adult, I grew up with the same wiring. And not that there's anything wrong with being selfless and serving and looking out for others, but where this becomes dangerous is when you get your identity and you live your life trying to please people and trying to gain everyone's approval. That naturally puts you directly at odds with God, because what people may approve on the outside, God may disapprove of. So if you're trying to win the approval of man, it'll always put you at odds with God. So I like to share some examples because I think this gives us a visual understanding with what we're talking about. There's a movie I really enjoyed when I was younger. It's High School Musical. And one of the leading actors in this movie is Zac Efron. He is the star basketball player of the school. later on starts to develop this love for theater and singing. And we see throughout the movie that his friends, as well as his father, disapproves of this newfound love for theater and singing because they want him to ultimately pursue basketball and go pro. So they have this expectation of him versus what truly speaks to him. And later down in the other parts of the movie, you see that they later on begin to accept this is what he wants to do. But in the earlier parts of the movie, you can see this conflict that he has with himself, trying to please everyone and live up to everyone's expectation of him while also losing himself. So I draw this example because this helps us see how damaging people pleasing can actually be, because it takes us away from our original identity of who we actually are, and we start to conform to who people think we should be. And that creates this double-mindedness, cognitive dissonance within ourselves, where we're constantly at war within ourselves because we're trying to live up to this expectation, because the driving force behind trying to live up to this expectation is fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of criticism. All of these fears that are driving you to live up to these expectations of other people. I want to get into two major signs, just two major signs that you may be a people pleaser. And I don't want you to feel any sort of way. There is hope, there is freedom, and you don't have to stay that way. You can always make up in your mind that you want to do things differently than how you've been doing it. It's never too late to learn and to do things differently. So let's get into some of these signs. The first one is you struggle with saying no. This was such a big one for me, you guys, because coming from the mind of a former people pleaser, there is this idea that if I say no, that'll mean that I'm this bad person, or that will mean that they won't like me anymore. That will mean that they'll be out of my life. That'll mean all of these meanings we attach to just saying no. And so it's easier to say yes when you really want to say no. And to make this practical in my life, how this pattern showed up, there was one isolated situation that happened with my car. I had a certain family member that wanted to use my car. Initially, I said no, but because of the pressure and feeling guilty and all of these things that I felt inside, I said yes. I changed my mind and I said yes. What later on happened as a result of that was I no longer have the car is broken down, and the car is history. What that situation taught me is that when we're people pleasing, we only do damage to ourselves. And we later on deal with consequences that we cannot go back from. So every time you say yes, when you really want to say no, I want you to think back to how it ended for you. I want you to think back to the consequences that you may have had to deal with, the mess that you may have had to clean up, or maybe the schedule that threw you off. Maybe someone at work asked you to pick up an extra shift, or maybe someone asked you for a favor that you went out of your way for. You know you couldn't do it, but because there's this driving force of being a people pleaser, of and all these fears and all of these things that are driving you, you said yes when you really wanted to say no, and neglected the things that are actually important to you. The second sign that you may be a people pleaser is you avoid conflict. And this actually coincides with number one, because the reason why you're saying yes instead of saying no is because you're trying to avoid the conflict of maybe them asking you why not, or maybe them telling you about yourself. So it goes hand in hand. To avoid that conflict, to avoid that feeling of discomfort, you just say yes. You just fall in line because you want to avoid that conflict. And I've had to realize in becoming more confident and more self-aware that not all conflict is bad. Sometimes you have to confront conflict to confront those patterns and address them head on. The more you avoid conflict, the more you avoid the opportunity to actually grow. Sometimes it's in conflict that we get to see parts of ourselves that actually need adjustment and need work and needs to be worked on. So there's this pattern in your life where someone asks you to do something, you say yes when you really want to say no. There's this pattern of you avoiding conflict. So even though someone may be saying or doing something that you actually wholeheartedly disagree with, you would rather, in terms of in your mind, rationalize past it as being truth. And this is where we get into dangerous territory at adopting lies to avoid conflict because we want to be approved of, because we want to avoid criticism, because we want to be included. We would rather embrace an obvious lie than to stand on what's true and what's right to be accepted. And we see this play out a lot of times in society with people who have different beliefs originally, and they go out into the world, and later on in life they adopt these radically different beliefs because of outside social pressure and pressure to conform. Most times you'll see those people have people-pleasing tendencies. So it's not even so much that they really actually have these beliefs, but they just adopted them as truth to avoid that conflict of being criticized, disapproved of, being rejected. And we have to be so careful of this, even with someone with a platform who is growing now. Whenever I share on certain topics and I talk about certain things, I have to always be careful of not wanting to please everyone, that I'm not being true to myself. You cannot please everyone. The quicker you understand this reality, the easier your life will become. We're not meant to please everyone. The person, think about right now, I want you to do this exercise. Think about the nicest person you know, who always says yes, never says no, who is always there for you, always gonna, you know this person is going to go out their way. Is that person respected? Or are they tolerated? There's a difference between being respected and being tolerated. Most times, as someone who is a people pleaser, they're tolerated. They're not respected because they lack boundaries. A real person with real emotions, with real feelings, has boundaries. And people pleasers are taught from a young age. Like myself, I was a former people pleaser. Boundaries are not okay. This makes you a bad person. This makes you a mean person. And so we believe this lie that if I have boundaries, if I say no, I'm mean. There's a difference between being nice and being kind, you guys. Don't allow people to put you in this prison of being nice and confine you in this prison of being nice where you lack boundaries, where you're not able to say no. It's okay. It's actually okay to say no. It's actually okay. And keep in mind, when you start doing this self-work and healing and owning up to your true self, you will lose people. I'm just, spoiler alert, you will lose people. But the people that you will lose are those who benefit the most from the broken you. The people that you will lose are the people who benefit from your brokenness. But the people that you'll gain will be so much worth it. Now, let's get into some causes. What are some negative causes of people pleasing? You guys help me out. Comment down below. What are some negative causes that you've examined over your life? Maybe if you were a people pleaser or if you struggle with being a people pleaser now. What are some negative causes that you've noticed? And you can also comment down below how you've been working through this. But I have 3 causes that impact us negatively when we are chronic people pleasers and we just want to please everyone. Number 1 is self-betrayal. Because the idea of the people pleaser is to make sure everyone's needs is above your own. Make sure everyone is happy at all times, even if that means you aren't. What naturally happens with that mindset is self-betrayal. So maybe you don't necessarily agree with doing a certain thing. You will go along with it because you want to please others. That is a form of self-betrayal. Or maybe your core beliefs and your core values goes against what this person is asking you to do in a relationship, and you go against it. That is a form of self-betrayal. Another major negative cause of people-pleasing is lacking boundaries. Anything that does not have a boundary is unprotected. So if you ever are driving and you see fields with no gates, and you see certain houses that don't have any gates, there's no place where that person's house begins and where it ends. People who don't have boundaries, people who struggle with people-pleasing, are uncovered. They're unprotected. And what happens when you don't have boundaries? You attract users, you attract abusers, you attract manipulators, you attract all kinds of people because there is nothing there to protect you. There's no boundary, there's no line showing where this person has limits. So naturally that leaves you open to all types of people that come into your life and turn it upside down. I've heard stories of people that meet certain friends or relationship partners, and their whole life turned upside down, took a negative turn because of this one person that entered their life. And because that person didn't have boundaries, they were able to get away with so much that later left them with so much that they had to recover from. And this goes along with being able to say no. Actually, no, I can't do that. And it doesn't make you a bad person for having boundaries. I know the lie that you were probably fed as a child, that if you didn't share your toys with every child that always wanted your toy, you were mean or you were bad, or whatever lie that you believed in terms of having boundaries, that because you have that boundary, it makes you a bad person. That's a lie. I'm here to dispel it right now. That is a lie. Boundaries protect you. They are there for a reason, and get more comfortable with implementing boundaries in your life. Anything that you love, you protect it. Put boundaries around your peace of mind. Put boundaries around your money, your finances, whatever area in your life that can easily be influenced by outside pressure and people. Those are the most important areas where you should put boundaries. It doesn't make you a bad person. We all need boundaries. Kids need boundaries. So adults most definitely need boundaries. And the last negative cause of people pleasing and being a people pleaser is burnout. You get burnt out. You get so tired being everything to everyone, and you have no energy left over for yourself. You will be resentful because these same people that you're bending over backwards for and going out of your way, most times you will feel resentful towards them, but it actually is not their fault. It's not. No one can make you do anything that you yourself haven't decided that you want to do. So while you're feeling burnt out and resentful towards this person for going out of your way for them, it's really not their fault. When you could have easily said no. To avoid that anger and that resentment that you feel inside afterwards, after doing all the favors, after wearing yourself out, you could have just said no. That no could have saved you so much trouble. But we're taught saying no and having boundaries are bad. It does not make you, hear me, it does not make you a bad person for saying no. And you don't have to always over-explain your no. No can be a complete sentence. No. And if you struggle with saying no, because some of these things, they become a skill over time, but you have to start realistically small. That's how you gain any habit. You have to start off small. So if you struggle with saying no, let's say, for example, someone asks you, hey, you want to go to a movie Friday night? Friday night, you have something planned for yourself, or you're doing self-care at the house, and you're someone who struggles with saying no, what I found works is delaying your response. So instead of saying no, you can say, give me some time to think about that. I'll get back to you. Or let me think about that. It doesn't have to be an automatic answer. And what you will notice, people that are skilled in manipulation, they want you to move in haste. They want an answer right then and there. They want you to rush. Those are people you need to be aware of. Anybody who is patient, who loves you, and who is accepting of you and can honor your boundaries, they're not going to rush you to an answer. They're not going to rush you to make a decision that will benefit them. So be aware of those people who rush you to make decisions. That's not a good sign. And if you're someone who struggles with saying no, one thing you can practice doing is delaying a decision or delaying your response. I'll get back to you on that. Or I'll let you know. That's the steps you can start taking slowly, realistically. If you've been this way for 20 years, it's unrealistic to think from one video, I got this down. Be more realistic with yourself and start off small. The expectation is not that you undo all of this overnight. The expectation is that you become aware of this behavior, and when you're faced with the temptation to continue, you make small steps towards undoing what you've been doing. It's the small habits that build up to bigger ones over time. So if you can't become this person overnight, of course, that's not realistic. I didn't become this person overnight. This happened over the course of time. And do not feel shame. Don't feel bad about yourself if you fail at this. We all have areas that we're not stronger in. It's not anything that you should feel bad about yourself in. But take the time, little by little, every day, to put these into practice, and you'll see changes over the course of time. And I wanted to leave you with one more thing on how to overcome people pleasing. And this one, you guys are probably gonna think like, what? This don't make any sense, Steph. But hear me out, hear me out, hear me out, hear me out. The action step that I want you to do or say something you feared of receiving criticism for or judgment for. Say, for example, you've always feared people's opinion about you, let's say starting a business, about you. Make it practical to your situation, right? You're the only one who knows your situation, so you would know what you've always feared people talking about. My challenge in this video for you, which is a action step that you can actually take, is doing or saying what that is, whatever it is. So for me, to make this practical and applicable, what it looks like in my life, how I was able to overcome people pleasing is actually exposing myself to the very thing that I feared, which is the rejection, the criticism, the disapproval. And that was by saying no, or actually doing the very thing that I feared the criticism for. Actually being on YouTube, making videos. You guys cannot imagine how much confidence it takes to sit and record a video, talk for 30 or 40 minutes, and then upload that same video for the world to see and comment on. That is something that I feared. That criticism, you have to be built a certain type of way to be able to do that. And so every time I upload a video, you guys are seeing in real time me conquering that fear. Every time I upload a video, that is me overcoming my fear of man in real time. And that is sometimes what it takes to overcome a fear. You have to be faced with it head on. Head on. And that type of strength only comes from God. Only comes from God. Your fear of God has to be bigger than your fear of man. And that's a bonus one. I wasn't even going to go there, but that's a bonus one. We're going to leave that right there. To overcome the fear of man, you have to fear God more. There has to be an even greater fear. And it's not like a fear like I'm afraid he's going to send me to hell. It's like a reverential fear where I know he is real. So anyone who has an opinion, who dislikes what I say, who doesn't like me, I fear God because I know he's real and I know his power. So I fear him more than I fear this human being who bleeds just like me, who's human just like me. And for some people, it may take you a while to get there because we grow in increments, but you have to get to that place where you fear God more. And I've come to that place. I've come to that place so much so where I am able to walk away from anything that doesn't glorify God or doesn't bring me closer to him, because I fear him more. And I'm able to show up on YouTube. I'm able to start clothing lines. I'm able to record videos. I'm able to do all of these things because of that awareness. And that helps me in my day-to-day life. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Of course, I'm human, so there's moments where the fear will try to come back up, but that awareness comes in. No. That's the end of the first part of this 3-part series of Becoming Fearless. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed filming it. And if you want to support the channel, be sure to visit our website, fearlesslyfree.store. Grab your merch. This is one of the shirts that I'm wearing today. Fearless. It's a statement. It's more than just a clothing brand. It is a statement. It is a lifestyle. So grab your merch. Be sure to send me the pictures that you take in them at fearlesslyfree.store. Also on our Instagram, fearlesslyfree. And I'll be back with more videos with part 2. You guys be sure to subscribe and like, share the video with someone who would tremendously benefit from it. And I'll see you guys in part 2. Until next time, bye. I love you guys.